Yeah, new hair, don't worry about it. I mentioned it in my posts. If you're curious, there's a whole cute little story about it if you want to check that out. But quick update, basically, I don't know, my last quick update was like 10, 15 minutes long. I gotta kind of readjust. I have like freezer timing where I'm like, this is only gonna take 5 minutes. And then it turns out taking like 18 days. So you know how it is. Anyway, what was I saying? Book update. Basically, this just hit me like lightning, and it's terrible to say because I actually fear lightning, and that's the only thing on earth that I think can actually kill me. Everything else is totally fine. But to the point, there's characters that I do mention that I throw them down as someone that is being talked about, referenced to, or anything like that. There's maybe three or four characters that kind of are like that, but the one in particular that has a lot of backbone to the character. There's a lot of other things written that their existence can be immediately validated and verified. You know, they've been referenced already, so you know the fact that they're not in the story is kind of something that would obviously need remedy. However, there's someone in particular. Her name is Growl. I mentioned this in my post. I just made a post about this, but I figured I'd make a video because who reads nowadays, says the guy trying to write a book. Anyway, let's move on. So basically, the point is that right now I'm focusing on my rat house. A lot of the characters that inhabit that, these are a lot of the characters that are going to be spread throughout the world as the story move on. We'll see what they're doing. We'll catch up with them. We'll understand what the things that had happened and how it kind of reflects upon them. Even if we're following another cast, we're not necessarily following those people. Those interactions, I think, are going to be really, really cool. But there are a couple people that are in the middle to later chapters, the ones that I kind of put on the back burner. Like I said, chapter one is about like a couple hundred pages long easily. By this point, I'll get a good label on that. I'll be able to specify exactly how many pages are there soon. I just gotta kind of have to do a lot of editing, adding things into the main document, seeing where it fits and things like that. And that all requires me to find my mouse. I've cleaned my entire house, and I don't know what. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, so I'm getting distracted. So back to the point. There's a character that is mentioned in one of my favorite scenes. Her name is Growl. Her brothers are kind of like I don't want to say peacekeepers because they're extremely they can be extremely violent, but the idea behind them is that they're given information. They have a sort of curse to them where they're not able to speak unless kind of spoken to and are allowed to speak back. The things they can say are a little bit limited, depending on what words were spoken to them, allowing them to speak. So if you basically said, hey, you guys, I want you to communicate with me however you want for as long as you're in this room, you may be able to kind of break through their inability to speak openly. For the most part, it's just you ask them a question, they're going to be able to answer as much as they can within the framework of the question that you ask. The reason for this is because they are kind of the middlemen between a lot of the different factions in the city that I'm working on. So if something is going kind of according to a plan that turns the balance of power, tips it in one direction or the other, they will basically seek to become that kind of moderator between them to get things properly balanced. You could imagine that when there's a lot of violent things happening around, you know, if one group attacks another group, there's a bunch of death and things like that. Their response to that is very neutral. They're to go in and basically say, what happened? Why did you do this? Is there a reason that we can validate that? Yeah, okay, maybe they say, well, these guys did this X, Y, and Z, and so we had to respond, and that is a situation where they can kind of evaluate and judge, but they are overall to be these kind of, I hate to say it, peacekeepers for as many people that they're going to kill, but the point is that if your reasons for doing things are not valid to the rules that are set for them to make these judgments, then they'll kill you. They'll absolutely get rid of you. So these guys, In the end, though, they're really sweet guys. This is just basically a thing they have to do. This is a family kind of job that they've kind of been stuck into. And so the idea that this is something they relish in doing is just not something that I'm interested in. I would much rather prefer it be something where they'll do it, they're not worried about doing it. However, at the same time, they would prefer not to. If they can just talk it out or they can kind of solve things in any other way, then that's kind of their preference. But they have a sister, and this is the person that I've mentioned that I never really expanded upon or wrote anything about. Her name is Graal. And I absolutely am fascinated with her right now because there are very, very few wild characters in my story. A lot of the characters have these fulfilling enough kind of backstories and interactions with other people that you get a good sense of who they are. You can kind of say this is how they would react in any given situation. With a couple people, very, very few people, and her being one of them, Growl, I feel, is going to be that very chaotic character, that character that whatever she does is not based on the reasons I have for pushing my story forward, but because she is that type of person that will do those types of things. So even if she interrupts things that I want to have happen, even if she completely ruins what I have going along for certain characters, her presence in things I think is going to be so much fun. And so there's, again, thinking about it, immediately the first thing I can think of is Bricks. Bricks is another one. Bricks and Growl. Bricks, however, takes place in the section that I'm currently working on. He is someone who will interact with all the people around. They'll reflect upon him. He'll, influence other people. But Growl is much further in the story. She's in the middle to later portions of things. And so the idea of a reader being able to experience all these different characters, all these different stories, getting up to this one thing and realizing that there's this person that has this kind of personality that's just very wild. And she's not evil, she's not mean or anything like that. But for the instance I'm writing, and something I mentioned in my my post, is that in this particular instance, it's a special occasion. These twin brothers were getting rid of her sister's old clothes, and it's already like, this is garbage. This is something that she hasn't worn since she was a child. She can't fit into any of them. They have to get rid of them. However, they know their sister. They can't just give it to just anyone, because if Growl sees them wearing her old clothes, she's going to go after them. So they chose a very specific person to give it to, and that would be Cassandra. I just slid my laptop further underneath my bed. I didn't mean to do that. I just saw it sticking out, and I was like, what is that? And I pushed it. And so anyway, when I forget about where that is and I look for it for about an hour and a half, what am I talking about? Growl. So the point is, they are hanging out with Yeslin in her tiny, cramped, little leaking, because it's raining constantly, apartment. And Cassandra shows up. She gets some clothes. It turns out it's from them. And they go through this whole explanation when they're asked, and they're saying, all right, I actually don't know why you brought these clothes. Can you explain to this kid why you actually did any of this? And they're kind of like, okay, so this is what's going on, but just keep in mind, if our sister sees you, she may attack you. And just keep in mind, if you win, because I hear that you're pretty good in the fight, she's going to keep going. Just let her win. Just give her the W, and it's going to make your life so much easier, because she's that type of person that she does not accept it. Even though Cassandra is only 10 years old, the idea of that person beating her and wearing her clothes, that's just going to mean that for the rest of her life, until Growl wins, she's going to go after this child. So, I like stuff like that. I think stuff like that is really funny. I think it really upsets the narrative that I'm telling, because a lot of the characters are not crazy. A lot of the characters, behave in maybe wild ways, but they'll have explanations for, Bricks, which is the closest person that I have that kind of meets her personality. Them two together would level a city easily. And so having this kind of new character that I just mentioned, and all of a sudden I got this taste of a personality that's so different from what I'm currently writing, is just filling my thoughts. That's what's going on right now. So that's it. That's my brief update. I'm going to stop it now, because usually I'll be like, oh, this is a quick update. And it's 20 minutes later, and I've been ranting and just talking about side things. And, earlier on, I spilled my cup of soda, and I was like, dude, I don't even drink that much soda. I'm not really that big on sugar. And so the fact that I got one and then I knocked it over, I'm really kicking myself in there. But anyway, I'm going to stop this video now. That's what's going on. Bye.